The views of the host do not necessarily equate the views of the guests, or vice versa. This podcast is not intended to act as a clinical diagnosis or an authoritative halachic source. Any questions regarding treatment should be directed to your clinician, and any halachic questions should be addressed to your local Orthodox rabbi. We also encourage you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and rate our podcast on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support helps increase visibility and allows us to reach more listeners who can benefit from our wonderful guest speakers.
This is Rabbi Ben Zion Schaefer of the Shmooze.com. Jewish adulting is about shining a light on parts of ourselves in order to do Avodas Hashem with all the tools and resources at our disposal. It is an honor and a privilege to have every day to further refine our character and grow closer to Hashem. Take advantage of these opportunities before it's too late.
Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Chedva Rose, your Jewish adulting podcast host. And I'm here tonight with Sherri Zaslow. And she's originally from the suburbs of Philadelphia, where she and her late husband were in a kiruv community and shul. You founded it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. And then they moved to Baltimore, where Sherri has been for over 20 years. Sherri has spent her professional career in education, senior care, and currently organizes health and wellness and community education, focusing on the Jewish community. Sherri has served on the Gilchrist Hospice Board and works closely with Bridging Life Jewish Hospice and Palliative Care Service. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Cheva. It's my pleasure.
Sherri did one of these wonderful things where she wrote me a really detailed bio for herself. And I told her, I'm going to have to not say all those things and let you tell it to us, because it's not as interesting when I say all these things. It's much more interesting when the interviewee tells it to us. So I hope we'll cover everything. I hope we'll get to everything. I know that you've had a long day. And also, we've been trying to I think you were one of the first people that I called to be on the podcast, and it's taken us this long to get to speak to each other. So I'm excited about that.
Me too. Thank you.
That's okay. Great. So why don't you tell me a little bit, for people who don't know you? Baltimore is a very large community. You know, I think sometimes we think everyone knows our story. I can't tell you how many people have told me, "Oh, you probably heard," and I totally didn't hear, because Baruch Hashem, we're a large community. I don't know everyone's business. And so a lot of people might not know your story. So can you walk us through what your life was like right before your husband's diagnosis, and then how that whole diagnosis came about, and what that did to you and your family structure and family dynamics?
Okay, we'll do the best we can. Thank you so much. So my husband, Daryl Zaslow, and I had been married close to 40 years, and we were kind of one of those dynamic couples, always busy doing something for somebody somewhere besides our professional careers. He was a pretty well-known lawyer in Philadelphia and the suburbs, and very involved in politics, and very involved in our Jewish life. And in fact, founding that, however we're going to pronounce that, the kind of kiruv community and the shul in our house was really kind of what we were about. And we just would have so many people coming through so many places and times. And it was really very, very special. And raising our children that way was really special. We were in a suburb of Philadelphia, which is kind of halfway between Philadelphia and Lakewood in a way. So it's a really interesting location. So people would be coming through from both ends. And right now, I'm really proud to say, even though I'm not there anymore, there's been the rabbi that we hired there many, many years ago. He's there, and a thriving community, a kollel, a mikvah, and it's still there, starting in our house. And I'm really, really excited about that. So everything, though, we did focus on our children and their education. And after raising our two daughters, who were ending up in Baltimore, and And then we had our son that was in yeshiva here. And we decided it was really better for him not to be in a dorm, that it's great to have a mom and dad around, or at least some of the time, more of the time. And we decided to come to Baltimore part-time. So we were renting a home, and Daryl was commuting back and forth to Philadelphia. And it reminds me of, in the Torah, where we came to sojourn, but not to kind of live and stay. But Hashem had many other plans for us. So our youngest at the time, he's like, after our third child, our son graduated high school here and was going to yeshiva. Our youngest child was like, why would I go back to Philadelphia? All my friends are here. I love Baltimore. These are my camp friends. So we stayed in Baltimore, and Daryl commuted for many years back and forth. He would work part-time here and then go back. So our life was like that. And then our children were settling here, except for one of them had settled in New York. And life was humming along. We were involved in many things. Daryl gave speeches here. He grew esrogim. I was very busy at Talmudical Academy in their middle school. I had a great job there, loved all the kids. And we were making a new life here for ourselves. And we were still somewhat connected to Philadelphia, especially because Daryl's job was there. And I'll never forget it, because everything was fine. We were making plans for kind of our older age. We were only young 60s, 60, 61, but you start thinking about what's coming. So that's where the stage is pretty well set of what's going on. We had 3 kids here who were married, and then 1 in New York. And I remember it was, what did they used to call it, Chedva? They had the Shabbos for, everybody would invite different people that maybe didn't know about Shabbos to help them.
Oh, it was the I know what you're talking about.
Shabbos project. I think it was called
the Shabbos project. Yeah.
Okay, so we were involved with that for many years. And literally we had some people over. We had a very full table. It was pretty crazy. And that was a Friday night. And Daryl mixed up Kiddush. It was just like a weird way. And then he mixed it up that I kind of took notice of it. And also I was walking someone home that night, and then we missed each other. He said, I have to do something, start walking, I'll catch up with you. And he didn't. It was just odd things. That was a Friday. And then the weekend went by. He seemed tired, and I thought maybe he's coming down with the flu or something. I don't know. And then on Monday morning, or maybe Tuesday, I forget which, he was going back to Philadelphia for a day or two to do some lawyer work. And we were also getting ready to celebrate my father's 90th birthday. We were having a big party in Baltimore. Relatives were coming in from all over the place. And he called me on Tuesday night, and he just sounded off. And he sounded exhausted. And he just was like, I think I want to speed up the timetable for being in Baltimore full time. This is just not good. And I never heard him like that. Daryl was never negative or rarely negative. And then the next day, it was a Wednesday. I said, Tuesday night, I said, why don't you just come on down? Don't wait till Thursday. Just come earlier. We have the party anyway. Just get out and come on down and work from here. And then Wednesday, he called me and he said, I'm on my way home. Do you know one of those on the way? I think I need to go to one of those places, you stop if you don't feel good. I'm like, an urgent care? He's like, yes. Well, meanwhile, I was in my car at the time, and I pulled over to talk to him because this was very odd. And I was like, well, what's the matter? He says, I don't know, something. I'm like, do you have a headache? No. Are you nauseous? No. Is your heart beating fast? No. What's the matter? Something. And I just didn't like that. That was very odd indeed. And this was out of nowhere. So one of our friends was running the emergency room at GBMC at the time. So I called there to see if he was there. And of course, they couldn't tell me. I said, okay, I know you can't tell me, but if he is there, would you tell him Sherri Zaslow's on the phone?
Right.
So he did get on, what's up? And I said, I don't know, Daryl's driving in and something's wrong. I don't like the sound of it. Maybe he's coming down with something. And he said, okay, I'll wait for him, just tell him to come right to the emergency room, GBMC. So I called Daryl back and I said, stay where you are. I'm coming up the highway. I think he was maybe at the end of Delaware at this point. I'm coming to get you. And he's like, no, driving was everything for him. No, 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 I'm fine. I'm fine. I said, well, so-and-so will meet you at GBMC emergency room. Can you put it in your GPS? Yep, no problem. And the fact that he wasn't even arguing that he's going to emergency room was really alarming. So I called our friend. I said, he's on his way. I said, I am too. He goes, no, no, go home. I'm sure it's fine. Too many people get crazy here. Don't worry about it. I'll take good care of him. I'm like, reluctantly, okay. So I went home. I knew Daryl made it there. And I kept texting and calling and texting and calling and texting and calling. And I wasn't getting any answer. And maybe about 11 at night, I think he had got there at 9. Finally, he answered his phone and he said, come, just come. And he sounded awful. I said, what? He goes, I can't even talk. Just come. And I said, what? Just tell me now. And he said, brain tumor. And that was, my entire life changed in that millisecond of hearing those words.
Wow. Wow. So how long had you and Daryl been married up until this point?
We were about 16 weeks away from our 40th anniversary. And interestingly enough, we met in 6th grade. So we like to tell people we really been married like 50 years, but it was going to be 40 years. And we knew each other. We grew up together. We did the bar and bat mitzvah scene together in the conservative world of the suburbs of Philadelphia. So we knew each other a very long time. I knew his whole family, knew mine. Yeah. So it would have been 40 years.
So, okay. So now there's this new reality in your life. And how aggressive was this tumor? Was this something that the prognosis was like, obviously the prognosis, he ended up passing. So obviously it wasn't good, but right. At the time, what did we know? What were the thoughts?
We knew nothing. And that's why I just feel like so many people need support in our healthcare system. In fact, I'm really excited. I can talk later about someone I'm bringing in through my job. Am I allowed to say where I work?
Yes, yes.
Through my job with LifeBridge Health, we have a partnership with the JCC, a beautiful partnership, and now the Associated. And we're bringing in a wonderful speaker in November. I can get to that later because I think it speaks to this. And so much of my life comes full circle. I see where all the dots connect. But they were pretty sure it was something called GBM, glioblastoma. Never knew that word in my life. And at the time I thought, wow, it's right. It sounds like such a pretty word, glio. They call it glioblastoma, but really it's the blast part that is that you need to know. And they were pretty sure that's what it was. Very aggressive. It had already crossed what's called the midline. I mean, I didn't know anything, and you have to like come up to speed awfully quickly. And then we were going to transfer from the hospital down to Hopkins to another doctor to get the final surgery and tests to know definitively. But there was like this, chance, you hear all these beautiful touched by us stories, or if you just dive in hard enough, it will change, or, maybe it's not going to be a glioblastoma. There's a very tiny, tiny chance it could be lymphoma. Never thought I would be davening my heart out for lymphoma in my life. So he went through everything. And when we had a very bad experience there. Unfortunately, it was, sometimes doctors were not sensitive, but make a long story short, when he came out and said, just as he thought glioblastoma, literally, I lost my breath. I don't think I could breathe again for years. But in that moment, I couldn't catch a breath. And I remember just standing up and like walking quickly. And one of my sons just like followed me out the door, and I just like walked, around the city for like 15 minutes until I could just wrap my head around it. Because by that point, a few days later, I had read about it and knew that, most people don't live. Most people die within 5 months, but they can live 18 months. There's very few that ever make it beyond that. The cure has not changed. The medicine has not changed in years. There was a bill passed because of John McCain where they're throwing more money at it. We do a brain tumor run every year, but glioblastoma is pretty much a death sentence, and it's just a matter of like how's it going to handle, which way is it going to go. I was sure again, we were going to be the ones, because we were achievers and unusual and Zaslows, and we were going to be the ones to beat it. We were going to be the poster people for this. And Daryl kept saying, Sherri, he was in reality. This is not going to go how you want. I'm like, no, we have to do everything. And he's like, okay, we will, but it's not going to go how you think. And he made his peace with it. He really did. So
did they tell you what stage it was?
The glioblastoma at that point that's it, end stage. There's no, like, once you got it, and it was aggressive because it had crossed what's called the midline of the brain. So yeah, there's maybe a chance it's at the beginning if you're, and maybe you could do something. But I mean, most of the people I know lost their loved one to glioblastoma. Like when I was watching and listening about John McCain on the news, and I was kind of like nodding, yeah, no, this is not going to go like they'd say. And sure enough, he passed away at the average mark. But still, you can't do anything. You can't do anything new until you do what's called protocol. So we did the protocol. The problem is very, very quickly, Daryl lost. This was heartbreaking. He was a prolific speaker, writer, reader. He could not read. He certainly could not write. He was having trouble finding words. But some of it was humorous in the beginning because he couldn't just tell me. My favorite story is he can't just say, go pick up the paper that's on the floor. And he would sit there and he would think and he would go, take a circuitous route, look below and underneath for an obstruction.
Right.
Because he was so intelligent, but he couldn't find the words. And, it was really hard. And
right. And that's something that they call aphasia, right?
Yes,
right,
you can't speak. And he lost a lot. He couldn't read. He could, I set things up that he could, he could shower and, dress himself. But this was tough, and it was very tough. I was working and I was afraid not to work at this point. Things were happening quickly. And because of his memory being affected, I wrote a blog about, being seniors long before we were. And, he couldn't remember passwords and he couldn't function in that. And we had to break into the computer. There were bills to pay that, wasn't on my list. And we had to quickly do that. And it was ironic, him being a lawyer, me being in senior care. We didn't have updated wills. We had talked about getting, funeral arrangements, burial plots, nothing. And I'm working with him with half a brain trying to, get all this done. And I just have to say, my children, my family, and our very closest friends were absolutely amazing. Each of our children, and I'm so grateful because I watch families fall apart, and we got it together. So each child kind of had a specialty that they took care of, and I could not have done any of it without them. I was like in a date. I didn't even know. I was just trying to survive and each day, do what was ever in front of me and try to accomplish it.
Right.
So they're amazing.
So that's beautiful. Why do you think that Daryl had an acceptance in a way that you didn't have? Like, why do you think he, first of all, accepted it so quickly? It sounds like, unless you're hurrying the timeline along for the sake of the narrative. But if he did have that sort of acceptance, understanding, sort of matter of fact, attitude towards the diagnosis, what about him, or what about the way he grew up, or the way he got closer to Hashem, or in his avodas Hashem? Was there anything that it didn't surprise you, or something about his personality that made him get there a little faster than you, do you think?
Daryl was kind of on a very close basis with Hashem. He really was. We were raised in a conservadox shul. This was Philadelphia back in the 60s. And so when people become Baal Teshuva, it's kind of like from nothing to everything. We were hovering somewhere in there, of the conservative world. But when he was in college, he sort of had, I'll call it a visitation, however you want to call it, from Hashem. He just knew without a doubt that God existed, and there was, besides our national Jewish God, there was a personal God. And he became and this really drove him and drove us to cross the boundary into an Orthodox lifestyle later. But while keeping the family, meaning our extended family and our friends, as close as we could, and making this just what was good for us and for what we saw as our job in the world. So Daryl really had so much faith and so much emunah that, he I don't know, he just saw it. I think also, he heard it before I heard it. He saw the MRI before I saw it. And he really heard what they were saying. And I was more Pollyanna in it. And he wanted the reality there so he could help me be ready for it. He didn't want me to not be ready. He couldn't believe it. And he was tearful. It was horrible for him. He couldn't believe he was leaving his grandchildren, his children. We have a very close family. He couldn't believe, that he wasn't finished here. He really wasn't. Hashem, though, let him finish. He had about 4 books in the works, and Hashem let him finish one, and then the most important one that he wanted to do before he took him. And he was grateful. He was grateful for that. But I think just he heard it and he accepted it. And I think he had maybe a special pipeline where he knew. And he said to my daughter once, we were at a doctor appointment, and he said, I am so sorry to leave you all. It's just so sad. He really was, it's just awful. And he said, but I promise you, I will see you at the coming of Mashiach. It is not far off, and I will see you again. We will be together, and don't ever forget that as long as you live. So that's, I think, helped him, do what he had to do.
So he found comfort in the idea that, first of all, you reunite in Shemayim, but you also reunite when Mashiach comes. So there's that it's not that death is not a goodbye. Death is a see you later type of situation. So
he had also faced on the Zaslow side the death of his younger brother suddenly, about maybe it was 5 or 6 years previously. So we had been a little bit through that, and his brother had written a book called The Last Lecture, Jeff Zaslow, many books, but in that book he's talking, when he's interviewing someone who knew he was dying, Randy Pausch. You can look it up. It's really well
written. I read it.
Yeah. So Randy talks about this time before he was dying of kind of sewing nets for his family. And I feel like Daryl was doing that in this very, very short, squishy time we had. Time was compressed. Every second mattered. And I feel like he was sewing as many nets as he could during that time for us. And, I think every one of my children recognized that, as well as our extended family and our whole family, the extended family. My sister-in-law is my sister, my father, who was elderly at that point, turning 90, and he flew up and back. He couldn't have been more supportive. My in-laws at the time, anyway, my mother-in-law, but everybody was so supportive, and it made a difference. So these nets he was busy sewing that, to kind of cushion the blow for all of us as much as he possibly could.
Right. So, okay. So just to put it in context, the follow-up question, how long from diagnosis to death? What was that timeline like? Because you said it was a very abbreviated, short, squishy timeline. What was that timeline?
I have a name for it. I call it the 14 weeks in capital letters. In fact, I've spoken on panels about it. When there's a social worker event this week, they show a film called Being Mortal, and then there's a panel on it, and a palliative care doctor. But we talk about kind of having preparation. This is what I learned from this, but the 14 weeks, and it was so compressed, and that was it. It was 14 weeks.
So so that's like a little bit more, it's a 3.5 month period of time. And right.
Little,
If my
yeah,
if my math is okay.
yeah.
And and um and so here you are, you're still working. Daryl's obviously has aphasia. He probably stops working immediately from the diagnosis. Is that right? Did he go back
Oh,
into work and close things
immediately.
out?
Oh yeah, immediately. Everything happened so quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
immediately. But he pushed so hard through to, like, we drove him to his office to try to, he kind of, in his brain tumor stupor, he was so strong he could try to get things in order as much as he possibly could. Yeah. So
Right.
he was,
So then your day to day became the protocol,
yeah.
um, which is probably chemo, radiation, um, and then the continuous decline, like you said, of his acuity and his words and whatever the side effects were of all of that. So at what point did you go from following the protocol to and you also mentioned that you didn't have really any idea about some of these things that pre-planning that you hadn't done, that you eventually you're going to do the will, the the burial plot, all of that stuff, including passwords to payments and stuff. What Once you figured all of that out, what did your day-to-day look like? Did you stop working at one point? Did like how did Because sometimes when people are in crisis, and especially something like this, so I'm just gonna disclose something. I mean, I don't know when this podcast is gonna be um released, because I have Baruch Hashem 30 episodes and we're up to 14. What was issued today, was released today. So I'm not sure when this podcast is going to be coming out, but it won't be for a
Wow.
little bit.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. It's phenomenal. I'm loving every minute of it. But what people don't know, something that I haven't shared very publicly, um, is that my mother-in-law, I'm sorry, my mother-in-law was just diagnosed with the fourth stage glioblastoma. Um, and
Oh,
yeah, and it was also, she was working up until July 3rd. It came completely out of the blue. She had a heart surgery. Um, they replaced a valve of hers, and she wasn't recovering. She kept falling, and so we said, "Oh, she needs rehab. Let's get her evaluated for rehab." And in the course of doing due diligence, they found two very aggressive tumors in her brain.
oh,
So she should have a refuah shalema, but we
amen.
actually went out there like 2 weeks ago, and they the same thing. They have the protocol, they have the radiation, and they have
Temidar.
right, and exactly, and but they're basically telling us that she has, without radiation, she has a month to live. With radiation, they're saying maybe 4 or 5 months, maybe. But visiting her was, again, they're sort of like, okay, she was a completely independent individual up until July 3rd.
Right.
So, and then she was completely lucid up until like a few weeks after that, and taking care of her finances. She's single, proud woman. And one of the things, and I'm going to share this with the audience, because, she has, Kanina her 5 children, two who live in LA with her. I mean, not with her, but like in LA, close to her,
Nearby. Right.
nearby. And it became like a guessing game about like, what are her bills and what did she take care of? Does she have a power of attorney? Does she have a will?
Yep.
What arrangements did she make? And she has also aphasia. She doesn't remember very much. She's very overwhelmed. She's extremely sad, and she's going through the grief cycle, and she's really whatever. And I recognize that there is this. My husband went out there. He's been out there for about 7 or 8 weeks now.
Wow.
And right. And so the question that I'm sort of getting to, besides for the fact that like now I have, when I initially asked you to speak, I didn't have such a close connection to this diagnosis. I actually thought Daryl had a different cancer altogether. I don't know what I thought he had. Maybe I thought he had pancreatic cancer. I don't know. Maybe I was confusing him with the book, right? That guy, did he have pancreatic? But I don't know. I didn't remember that Daryl had a glioblastoma. So it's just interesting to me that I'm hearing this now because I just spoke to my husband today and I said, "When are you coming home?" And he goes, "I don't know because I want to be here every day. I want to go visit her and check on her and take care of arrangements and just what like he wants to be there, but he has a
Yeah.
job, he has a family, he doesn't live there. It's like it's a different reality. So what did your day to day, like at what point did you stop working? Did you continue to go to work? I mean, you have a bunch of children here, so I'm sure that there was, you know, round the clock sort of visitation and trying to help you. And you said like you had a lot of support. How did that? What was your new reality? Your daily new reality?
So my kids were amazing. My daughter could visit at her lunch hour every day. It really wasn't enough because
Hmm.
we needed someone in the house, and I didn't even have time to get somebody. And it was hard because male friends are working, this and that, but the kids did everything they could. As well as, my brother-in-law, my sister who visited, my other sister, they did what they could do. I just felt so overwhelmed that I had to go to work. I didn't really know about and think about what's called FMLA, that, take an FMLA break from your work. You're not going to get paid full time. I mean, it's only your vacation pay or whatever, but do it. I was just so afraid to. I was afraid to stop working. I just didn't know what would happen and financially, and I was scared. But Hashem, he did a good joke on me because 2.5 weeks before Daryl died, I lost my job out of nowhere. Just like the glio came from nowhere, I lost my job. So I went through, then I was out of my mind at the time. I'm like, how does this work? How do you do your health insurance? Like I'm paying Daryl's health insurance at this point. And now what happens? I made some bad mistakes with the government. But anyway, um, thank God I lost my job because I have
Oh,
regrets looking back that I didn't spend enough time with him living, that I was scrambling so quickly to try to solve things and do things. And I wish, I could have just read to him more or sat more. And I do feel bad about that. So it was hard because I was the primary caregiver. So,
right.
I get where your husband's coming from as a child, and I'm sure he's also getting strength from the siblings being together. I hope he gets to come back here for a little bit. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's really hard.
It's hard.
It's
It's hard because
hard.
she's also in denial about it, which Daryl isn't. My mother-in-law was like, "Okay, what do we do?" And they said, "Okay, we'll do radiation and chemo." And then she said, "And then what?" And they're like, "That should be about maybe 4 or 5 months." And she's like, "And then what? Do I just die?" And they're like, "Well, we're doing the best that we can." And she's like, "But then what?" So, she did a whole long speech about how she wants to do everything she can to fight. And I'm the only person in the room going, "Yeah, but like, well, how do we know?" Actually, I asked, this is interesting, and I'd like to hear if this question occurred to anybody in your family. Like, I actually, I don't know what, maybe because I do this podcast, but it occurred to me that are there halachic shilas or considerations when it comes to hospice or palliative care?
So I will say this is my topic, and I will say yes and no.
Hmm.
There are, but it's not what people think. So first of all, there are trial. How old is your mother-in-law?
She's 80.
Okay, so there are trials, but it's after protocol and blah 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 blah. Um, Daryl, he there's a couple ways that this could end. One's kind of a slow descent of just losing it, and you get in hospice and palliative care where you're at somewhere. Daryl had a sudden brain bleed. I call it his brain exploded. And I knew right away, I was on the board at hospice at the time, and I knew I was going to have him inpatient. The way our house was, it was not going to be some pretty window near a lake and, people coming in and out. It wasn't going to work like that in this old Victorian on Wallace Avenue. So anyway, but it was really beautiful. And he was at Hopkins as an emergency. So we had to transfer him anyway to the Gilchrist facility. And so, but he lasted a week there. Now, palliative care, though, we knew that that was going to come in at some point. We were supposed to travel to Duke University to see about a trial, but he didn't make it that far. So if there is no trial, then yes, it's palliative care. But what I would suggest, because I did this with my mother, it wasn't glioblastoma, something else, is that they do things so well, the social worker, the nurse, everybody in charge, the doctor, the palliative care doctor, the hospice, that you don't have to ask her. You can just say, we're just gonna, see, we just want to hear information. So later on we would have it. They'll do the talking and she'll hear what she needs to hear at the right time. And it does make things so much more, you're living instead of just scrambling for the next thing that's not going to help and, worrying, and it's hard. It's a lot of pressure. So you don't give up. It's nothing like that. But there are halakha considerations. And I said yes and no, because at one point when Daryl was kind of in that last week after the brain bleed, I'll call it a coma, or an unconscious, a semi-conscious state. And he lasted a lot longer than he should have. He should have, they thought, within 48 hours, that'll be it. And that wasn't happening. And I literally, and Purim was coming, and I thought, oh, again, my way of thinking sometimes of miracles, oh, it's upside down. This kind of reset his brain. He's gonna be okay. Like it killed the glioblastoma and his brain's gonna regenerate. Okay, I know it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but this is what was going through my head. So anyway, so I started thinking, oh my gosh, now should we start giving him, a feeding tube and this and that? I was going through the whole bit, and I called the rabbi, and he came over. And luckily, I also have a son-in-law who is he runs an intensive care unit close by. He's a critical care doc, an intensive care doctor, and I had them all over, and so the rabbi's like, yes, you could do everything, go do everything. And then, my son-in-law's like, you just have to understand, if you do that, because of the state he's in, Mom, he could choke and die from choking. It's not like he's just getting something all of a sudden, and then you have to transfer him, then transfer him back. There was a lot involved. And so, of course, the rabbi went with the doctor and me, and I'm like, I can accept he's dying of glioblastoma. Okay, now I get it. It didn't reset his brain. He is dying, but I don't want him to die from choking. He's peaceful now, whatever's going on, and I'm not going to interfere with that. Let's leave it. And honestly, I talk about the 14 weeks, and the 14th week was honestly so supportive, the most supportive time out of the entire other 13 weeks. And we had the family, and it was beautiful. And, just people came out, and we were reading, and we were learning, and my boys were learning Pirkei Avot with him, and the grandkids would come in. And it's crazy. It was a very peaceful time for us, as crazy as that sounds. And I'm just going to mention this. As I was sitting there, I don't know why, I noticed on Amazon Sherri Mandel's book, The Road to Resilience. And for some reason, I needed to order it that day. And I ordered it, and I don't even remember if it was delivered to the hospice or to the house, and somebody brought it over. But there was a line in there. I'm going to misquote it, but the gist of it, and this is how I live everything, and I share this. She of course lost her son to terrorists who had trapped he and another friend. They were 13 years old in a cave and stoned them to death. And how do you live through that? So I figured she knows what she's talking about. Whatever she says, I'm going to listen to. So she quotes Rabbi Soloveitchik, who says loosely, because I'm not quoting it perfectly, that our job as Jews is to take our fate and turn it into our destiny. take our fate and turn it into destiny. And I read that during this hospice phase. And it changed me, because if the fate is that your mother-in-law has glioblastoma, or Daryl had it, or, you go bankrupt, or you lose a job, or whatever it is, if that's our fate, that seems kind of final and kind of like a noun, like what do you're just in it. But if it's your destiny, then there must be something to grow from it, to learn from it, to do with it. So this
Right.
actually, this helped me get through that. But back to palliative care and hospice care, they know how to talk about it, and it's really beautiful. But when you have somebody that, doesn't want to hear about it, you just hope maybe they'll at least just hear it for the future, not for now, just for the future. Right.
So he went into hospice care after his brain bleed. Is that right?
Yes, I would have looked into it at some point. We weren't quite at that point yet, because there was nothing we needed it for at that point. We were kind of, he had finished the radiation, he had finished the chemo. They told us we were going to be in a bit of a honeymoon period, believe it or not. We had just left the doctor's office. He was dancing around telling us, yeah, now you're going to be in your honeymoon period. He's going to be feeling really good in a couple of weeks. And then we had our appointment set to go to Duke to see if there was a trial for him. But, he had a brain bleed the next day instead. So,
Right. So actually, I just want to, I don't know, validate or something you said that I also experienced in my own way. But the 2 days preceding my mother's death was sort of, we just had to wait and see. They basically told me she was going to die, and we just had to wait until she died. And so there was nothing I could do besides say goodbye and talk to my siblings and try to just come to terms with it, do some, what's it called? Like, not preemptive, but like sort of grieve while she's still here, grieve for what's going to be, and preparatory grieving, and um, when they called me to tell me that they had started resuscitation, and I wasn't like, will she get better? Won't she get better? It was, like there was sort of a weight lifted off of my shoulder, like we're there. And now I could just be in this moment and deal with this moment, because there's no more of past and future. It just is right now what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You just said that so beautifully. You really did.
So
It's
I think a lot of people probably, it might feel weird, because I think the night my mother died was the best sleep I had had in 15 years.
I can believe it.
Because until that point, I was always like waking up in the middle of the night and having my phone on Shabbos, and did I miss her call? Or, I was constantly on. It was the first night I turned my phone off and I just slept.
Yeah.
And that was whatever. So, okay. So now we have the immediate time after his death. So you had that week where you sort of had this preemptive grieving. You knew he was going to pass. It was a matter of time. You were in hospice, so I'm assuming, even though you sound like you were in a little bit of denial about it, you were getting there. You were getting to a point where you had some acceptance. What would you say was life like? If you could tell me, like, once he passed, did you have this sort of like inward? Did you go inward? Did you go outward? What was your particular grieving style?
I was actually, so I left hospice every day for at least 2 hours. I knew that life was going to keep going. And if I didn't leave at least 2 hours a day, this was not going to be good for me. I knew that I had grandchildren and children and survival mode, and I was going to have to somehow keep living. So, and I also knew that however he was going to pass, it was either going to be when I was there or not when I was there. It didn't, I wasn't, it was okay. You know what I mean? Hashem was going to do it, and it was going to happen when it was meant to happen. So one day, I guess that was maybe day 7 even, or I think it was day 7, could have been day 8. I left to go home to take a shower and, get some clothes and whatever I was doing at the time. Maybe I met a friend even for coffee. And I was driving back and something was playing, one of Daryl's favorite concertos, Bradenburg concerto. Anyway, and and the sky all of a sudden, it was a beautiful day. It got pitch black, like pitch black. And I don't know what happened. And there was like a quick storm that went through. And I don't know why I knew that second Daryl died. I felt it. I felt him. I felt the whole world shift. And I walked in the hospice room and the boys looked up at me crying. They were reading Pirkei Avot with him. And they said, Dad, Dad just died. But as much as I was sort of ready, I wasn't ready I felt like a very piece of my neshama, a very chunk of my heart simply ripped. And so I wasn't ready for that. I guess I was thinking about maybe how would I live without him, but I wasn't ready for that moment of simply a physical sensation of that. And then, the rabbi came and we had to get in mode. I had a job to do now. And so I really couldn't focus on me. Now I had a job to do. I got ripped in half and now I had a job to do. So we had made arrangements that we were going to Israel to bury Daryl. I have to give Levinson's a shout out. They were unbelievably supportive. I have stories that I would tell on more personal level, but they were so supportive, as well as Rabbi Hauer at the time, and of course the family. And we had to get to Israel. So, the next day we had the funeral, and my kids were over, and one of my friends literally in my closet. I'm like, I just pack me, just whatever, just do it. And when we got there, everything was very supportive, and I had Machatanim there who we all stayed there Shabbos, and they were so sensitive. They even invited a friend of ours to come for Shabbos. They thought that would be a nice thing. And we sat Shiva there Motzi Shabbos before we flew home. And then, Shiva died down, and then life had to start going. And from the start of Daryl's illness, I looked for what I called the lights along the way. It was such a dark tunnel, but I said every day I have to, where's the light? The light is there. Hashem is there. Where's the light? And it might be I was driving back from, I remember transferring him from one hospital to the next, and my GPS took me on a beautiful road that I never found again. And the sun was shining and there were flowers, and this was winter and it was gorgeous. And I said, thank you, thank you. And so every day I would try to find a light in the darkness, because I wanted to always remember that things are horrible and hurtful and scary, but there's still the beauty and the love in this world that never ever leaves. That's always there. So I tried to balance it that way.
Right.
So
you actually took a professional turn. Something about this experience with Daryl inspired you to start a project. You want to tell us a little bit about that project?
Oh, yes. Sherri Zaslow, proactive senior planning. I had learned so much and made so many mistakes in this, and I had regrets. And I wanted to take, that proverbial lemon and turn it into lemonade. And what could I do with this experience? So no one else had to go through what I went through. And I created kind of this binder that people should have, their passwords and their wills, at age 50, get your will together, don't wait, things happen. And it's the best thing you could do. And, where do you want to be buried and who gets what, and, all those types of things. So I ventured out to start this business. It also was, therapeutic for me. And and I loved it. I worked with people with aging parents or themselves as much as possible. Ironically, not ironically, but fortuitously, but right now, again, with LifeBridge, we're having an amazing event on, it's in the September 18th, The Greatest Gift. And it's in conjunction with Saul Levinson and the Associated and Bridging Life and Jewish Community Services and the JCC. And we're doing there's a lawyer there and literally a binder and people, and they're talking about, planning, and don't be left in the dark like I was and scrambling when you could be spending that time with more important things than scrambling and trying to make up for lost time. So
Right.
that's actually coming up. It's amazing. And we have, I think, close to 400 people at the Gordon Center literally registered at
Oh,
this
wow.
point. Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to any of my podcasts, but I actually had Tova Jussum on, and she was actually a two-parter. We did episode 5 and 6 on wills and something called Peace of Mind Planner, which I bought on Amazon for like $15.
Yeah.
I bought 3 of them since I did that podcast. One for me, one for my father, one for my mother-in-law.
That's great. That's great.
And it's a tremendous, preparation tool. My father has been doing this planning like well in advance. I don't know since for the last 15 years, he's been telling me where his will is. Like, I don't know what his story is. That's probably a podcast for another time or a therapy session for another time. But some people really are on it. Some people it's harder because they have a harder time thinking about that part of their life. It's so much easier to say, I'll figure it out. There's really no reason. And also, will it matter once I'm gone? Like, let people deal with them. It's like the mess.
It matters. It matters a lot.
It matters a lot.
My sister, my brother-in-law are we're geriatric social workers for many, many, many years. So my parents actually worked in their business for a while. So they were very big on having everything in place. And when my father passed away, it'll be 3 years soon. Honestly, it was so easy. We weren't scrambling and cleaning and hunting down. It was unbelievable, because he was organized. Honestly, it was the best present he could have given us. It is the greatest gift. And I've worked with Tova. We've done some panels together also. So I'm so glad, that you got that. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, so we just had a little bit of a technical glitch. So I'm going to repeat my question. I'll probably edit it, but I'm open and transparent that sometimes this podcast needs to be edited. I wanted to, honor Sherri's time and ask about 2 more questions, but they're kind of a doozy. So I'll ask the first question first. You mentioned when Daryl passed that you kind of lost a piece of your heart. You had known him for 50 years, and it was this very transformative moment that when it actually happened. But for those of you who don't know, Sherri is actually remarried. And so I wanted to ask a really personal question on podcast, because why not? Which is, how did you get from this place of like grief and trying to survive and, looking for good in the world, which is all really beautiful, and trying to find light and goodness and being resilient, and just really to this point where you allowed the possibility of finding somebody new and moving forward. And you actually told me a story about what makes your current husband different than how most people tiptoed around you. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to this willingness to start a new relationship?
I'd be happy to. It's interesting because I really never wanted to date and never wanted to get married. Never, 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 never. And one time my friend brought it up very gingerly, and I shut that down real fast. First of all, it's a little funny, not funny, but when Daryl, in the midst of his, glioblastoma and everything, he would look me in the eye and he would say, "You are going to get married again. You're going to get married again. You need to get married again, and you're going to get," and I would look at him and I'd be like, "You're insane. You're crazy. And why are you even saying this?" But so maybe that was way, 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 way back in the corner, like almost having permission. But honestly, I was, making my life and going around, and I have a lot of grandkids here, and, professionally, and it was hard. I mean, I would have moments where, I would have a crying jag for, an hour. I'd like look at the clock and I'm like, okay, at 6:06, I'm going to stop and I'm going to get up and I'm going to do something. So it was literally about 2 years, only about 2 years after Daryl passed away. And I'm in the car after my granddaughter's bat mitzvah, driving with my friend, Shandy, and the phone rang, and it's on, of course, it's on the car phone, the speaker phone. And it's acquaintance, Vicky Oberstein, and she's like, "Hi, are you dating?"
Nice. Jump right in.
And I'm like, "No, thank you so much." She goes, "Oh," and then Shady's like, "Yes, she is." I'm like, "No, no, I'm not dating. No, I never want to get married. I'm not dating." And Shady's like, "Yes, she is." I'm like, "No, no, I'm not." And literally, like, I look at Shady, I'm like, "No, I'm not." And she looked at me in that car, and she's like the most pleasant person if you know her. Like, she's all like fun and games, right? And she was like, "You listen to me. I've been through hell with you." This is what she said. "I've been through hell with you, and I've supported you, and General would want this, and you are going out, because I'm telling you right now, we are finished. I will not be your friend." I mean, this, I couldn't believe it. Like, I'm like, "Okay, Figgy, I'll go out with him, but I'm not getting married. He needs to know that." She goes, "Okay, do you have a resume?" And I don't do resumes. I don't want to see his resume. I'm not giving a resume. Who is it? What's the story? Anyway, she goes, "Well, he rides a bike and you run, so I thought it'd be really good." I'm like, "Okay, fine. Does he like Trader Joe's also? Then we can go out." Anyway, so
you had high high standards.
Getting married, it was like a joke. It was like, what the heck? I'm going out on a date, and why? So the date was actually, I think, because I went into this that I'm not getting married. I'm not looking for anybody. I can't even imagine being with somebody else. No way. We had a very pleasant date. He pulled up. We were going to the Mount Washington Tavern to talk and play games, and there was some music. We established that we both like music. And when we pulled up, I said, "Oh, look at that! It's like the Hopkins campus in Mount Washington. It's big hills." I go, "I run through there. It's really pretty." He goes, "I was never there. You want to take me?" So there I am, in like my wedges and my whatever, and we're like, I said, "Sure." So it was fun. I took him on my run route. Then we went into the tavern, and he said, this is a big joke that our friends know and our family. And he says, "Oh, what can I get you?" And what do most girls say on a first date? "Diet Coke, please." And I said, "I'll have a shot of vodka, please. No ice." He said, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing." He knew he was marrying me from that moment on. But anyway, we had that shot of vodka helped. No, but we had music and we chatted, and I wasn't getting married. So it was very nice. It was like having a friend.
There was no pressure.
Yeah, I went again. Don't ask me why. And I went out again, and I went out again, and then I went out again. And he was growing on me. And we actually broke up a few times because I wasn't getting married. Okay, I was not getting married. And but then I kept going back to it because he turned into my best friend. He knew what happened is I think this was a turning point, but we met outside of my condo for on a Shabbos to take a walk. By the way, I think maybe I have to give credit to these like 12 other people tried to read this shit, tried to fix me up with him. We had already been dating. Like literally, I guess it was that obvious to people. Anyways, so, he asked if he could please use the restroom. I said, "Sure, come on up." He had not been in my condo. And he's kind of, going past where I light my candles, and I have pictures out there. And there's a picture of Darren and I, and he stopped in his tracks. He said, "Is that Daryl?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Wow, he's really good looking, and you guys were a really beautiful couple." And then he just kept walking and went to the bathroom. And I just stood there kind of stupefied, like, oh, I just from that moment on, Daryl was a part of our life. And it took me a while. It took me a year and a half took me a year to decide we could get married, and then another half a year to prep my family and talk about it and try to make it, an easy transition for everybody, the grandkids included, everybody. But Daryl was a big part of our life, and he still is. And, there's different ways people do things when they get remarried, but I didn't do any of that stuff. We do the yard site together. He's with us for all that. And I tell people this when they get married or they think they're getting remarried, but Daryl's pictures are still in our home. There's no reason they shouldn't be. They're, that was my life, and it's my children's father and my grandchildren's grandfather. And, there's certain things of Daryl's around, and he's part of our life. So it made it easy. It wasn't mutually exclusive, believe it or not. I will say a funny story. One of my grandchildren who's very, very philosophical and thoughtful. So let's see, we've been married now almost, 4 years. So she was, I guess, 7 at the time. And she said, Savta, Mashiach comes and Zadie will be here again, right? I'm like, yeah. Well, what's going to happen because you have Aaron and Zadie's back?
Right.
She's very worried about this. So we had conversations about it. She's okay, but it was very, very cute that this was.
What is the answer to that? I just actually I just interviewed Rabbi Chapman, who wrote a book about Mashiach. I feel like this is a good question that I should ask in retrospect, but if you're married to more than one person, because of death, who are you with when Mashiach comes? That's an excellent question.
I'm not sure, I know, my answer is, when Mashiach comes, everything is so clear. It makes so much sense to us. It makes no sense in our limited view right now, but I know it will. And I don't know, I want to read that book on Mashiach. The people that come back from being in the next world, I'm not sure, are they living in this world again? Are we all kind of in a hovering between worlds,
Right.
But I know for a fact that I know it'll work out and it's okay. So
right.
it's different. Yeah. So
interesting. It's a great question though. You're right. That's funny. So
but I do want to say something that people say to me. I want to interject this for listeners or for people that might be in this situation. This made other people feel better. Ooh, you got married and you're happy again. Everything's good. You've quote moved on. There's all these there's a great actually YouTube about it. You never move on, you move forward. A young woman who actually lost her husband to a brain tumor. You move forward, but it doesn't fix the grief that you have. Your grief is always there. It's very acute. I've had a grief counselor now. I can't even believe I'm saying 7 years because it seems like yesterday, but grief is very real. And it takes a lot of forms and it doesn't leave. But I did hear something that I'll also retell to you. Someone on, I think it was Instagram, and I wish I remember the name. I hate not remembering the name and giving them credit, was saying that grief is a big fat stone, a big rock in your pocket, and it happens and you're carrying this load of a stone with you all the time. And as time goes on a little and a little and a little, it starts to feel a little not as heavy. It's always there, but it's not as heavy. And it's not that the rock got any lighter, but you've grown. You've grown and you've thought about things and you've figured out how to live life with this stone with you at all times. And so it's like exercising. You built that grief muscle. So it's not always as heavy. It could be though at times that heavy, but it's not always that heavy anymore because you've grown that muscle. So that's how it is. So, I just think people should know that because it's important to know. It doesn't mean that you're not happy. I'm very happy. We have a great marriage, a lot of fun. we have 17 grandkids in this town, and his grandkids are all around the world, actually 17 of his, and it's busy, but it's just, that's how it happened. And people should know that it's one package. The grief, you don't have to take your grief, lock it up and put it away because it's probably not a very healthy thing to do.
Right. So So tell us a little bit about what you're up to these days. That life has really changed for you, and you're still like you're reinventing yourself over and over again over these last 7 years, um, and or more actually, right? And tell us what you're up to now. What are you doing? I mean, I know that you're with your grandchildren, and that's you're being a very active, grandmother. But what other things are you involved in?
Yeah, the kids and my grandkids are precedent. We have a lot of fun together. We make videos whenever one of them has a bar mitzvah. All the cousins, meaning all the grandkids, we get together. I'm the producer. Now some of them are getting older. They can be the director, and we make videos, and it's just so much fun. They're just the delight of my life, honestly, and I'm so blessed. I couldn't be too mad at Hashem because He made all my children here. The kids that were living in New York, they made plans to move down here when Daryl got sick. They thought he would last longer. They'd be supportive, but they were here for the rest of us. So anyway, all my kids are in town and my grandkids. I have 6 in Israel now, which is also beautiful. Daryl's buried there and they see him. So I work for this partnership bringing wellness education to the Jewish community. I do my own business, Sherri Zaslow Practice Senior Planning, pro bono on the side, because what happened was I loved it so much. And it got to a point where it was go big or go home. And at the same time, I was offered this job with LifeBridge and the JCC. And I said, you know what? I could kind of have my cake and eat it too. I could do this on the side pro bono, not have to worry about, I always felt bad, people couldn't pay or was too much money or, but I wanted to help them. And it's, when you're in a service industry like that, it's always a balance. So I decided to take this job because it went with my skill set of education and people and all kinds of different stages of life. And also I can help people on the side. So people call me. If it gets too much, either I'll recommend them to somebody or I might say, I'm going to have to charge you. Now it's going to be like a real job part-time. Not really, but so I get to do that. I do a lot of volunteering and speaking, depending on what it is. It might be about hospice. I'm doing a panel this week. It might be, I do it, believe it or not, Daryl used to give an annual Tisha B'Av shir that every year I hope is not going to happen because Mashiach will arrive. And I took that over. And I feel Daryl's presence with it. He always inspires me every year. I love doing that. Right now, I was asked because of my running days, which are not so much right now. I'm nursing my knee a little bit, but there's a beautiful unity run coming called Run for Israel for women. And we're hoping to get everybody involved. It's going to be at the zoo on November 17th. And there's an organization that we're partnering with that adopts orphans from 10-7 and whose fathers served in the army and have lost their lives this year.
What do you mean by adopt them? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, that we each of the orphans, and most of them have their mother too, are supported in their schooling, in having mentors, in having therapists, in after-school programs, anything they need. So to adopt each orphan it's not in front of me now, maybe I'll say $18,000, $20,000, I forget. There's other people in Baltimore who have adopted them on their own or with a group of people. So for the race, we're adopting, I'm the chair, I should know, but right now I've been thinking about glioblastoma, so it's not in front of me. So we're adopting a number of them, and we hope to raise funds for this, big funds. And so that's coming. You'll see all the posters.
And you have a superstar who's participating, right?
And thank you. Yes, of course. So somebody I've admired all these years. Actually, through my job, I do a run group, also an athletic group. Yes, so I've introduced them to her online. But Bidi Deutsch, who is the From Woman Orthodox marathon champion in Israel, is coming, and she'll be giving talks all around town. We're having, for the girls that sign up and raise a certain amount of money, there's a Shabbat lunch with her speaking. There's like a Malava Malkin Kumsitz. The next day, she'll be doing the race with us. She's speaking at the race. For sponsors, there's a special reception with her later. And then she's doing community talk for men and women that Sunday also later on in the day. So we'll be traveling between, let's see, the Nertamid is doing part of it, and also the JCC is doing the dance party, and and then the zoo is where the race itself will be. So we're really excited about that. So go to the website, runforisrael.net, and please sign up, any woman listening, and get your friends too. And it's going to be an amazing day for just an amazing cause. So I'm busy with that now, among many other things. Whatever Hashem puts in front of me, I figure I'm going to just do my best to do. So.
Run for Israel. Is there a 4 or it's FOR?
It's a number 4. The word run, the number 4, Israel.net.
Okay, I'll put that in the podcast notes. And you know what that means? It means that I have to release this episode before that happens.
I was just going to ask you. And I'll give a shout out to my co-chair of the race itself, Manucha Fink. She's amazing. And, I kind of bring the age of experience, and she's got that youthful bounce to everything. So it's great. We're a great team, and I love working with her for that.
Wonderful.
So I'm doing that, and some other volunteer opportunities here and there that come up. My days are pretty busy. Yeah. I want to tell a story. I don't know if we're going soon, but I want to tell a story before we go.
Yes.
Maybe I'll tell it now, and you can do with it what you will. You'll indulge me. I talk about finding the lights, finding gratitude. It's something, it's hard for people, and I feel for people, and I try to encourage them as much as possible, to do that whatever way, whether it's with therapy or by reading or Tehillim, whatever it is that sparks them. But something happened, and I look for there's so many things that have happened that were so shared, and that I get great comfort with, or messages from Daryl or from my parents, people that have passed. And this happened one time after Daryl passed away. I was in shul, and it was maybe Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah. And the rabbi was talking about the root word of, it might have been tefillah. I can't remember the whole Devar Torah, but somehow, it related to, how Hashem answers our prayers, that this will happen. And I felt an arm around my shoulder then. And they whispered in my ear softly. They said, I'm so sorry. This must be so hard for you to hear, because your prayers weren't answered.
Oh, ouch.
I know they didn't mean it that way, but I said to them, no, the opposite. I know my prayers were answered. They just weren't answered how I thought, and they weren't answered for Daryl. But I know somewhere out there, they're being answered for somebody else, because I know they didn't go nowhere. They are somewhere in Hashem's depository. So let's skip now to this year. And I was over with a friend whose husband died of glioblastoma. There's a huge club of us. It's unbelievable. It's sad but true. Whose husband died of a glioblastoma. In fact, when Aaron and I started dating, he was talking about his friend that he thought had a brain tumor, and he was helping. I'm like, was it glio? He's like, I don't know. I said, we have to find out if it's a glio. So of course I had to make friends with the wife right away. So anyway, she is dating. So she actually just got remarried, and they were dating, and they invited Aaron and I over for a Shabbos lunch. And I was talking to the person she was dating. And it turns out he's telling me a story about an illness that he had, and the miracle about it, because it turns out he had a brain tumor, and they thought that it was something else. But miracle of miracles, he came out of surgery, and it was lymphoma, which you can have treatment for, and which I davened that Daryl had. So not only do I kind of believe what I say, but I was like, Hashem, you sent this person in front of me. I'm not saying that my davening gave him the lymphoma instead of a worse diagnosis, but it showed me that all davening goes somewhere. And I felt like Hashem put him in front of me just to show me that, because I did believe it. So I just wanted to
Wow.
share. I hope it makes sense.
Oh no, that's fantastic.
And
Thank
I
you.
said to him, I said, wow, I didn't know who I was davening for, but I was davening for you. So he was also very moved for that. And I can't say it was him, could have gone to some other person in another world away, but I just really enjoyed and just felt so comforted that he was put in front of me to tell me this.
Wow. That's fantastic. That's all our tefillos are utilized. It just might not be utilized in the way that we had envisioned, wanted, thought was best, because we don't run the world with the same amount of oversight. We don't run the world at all. And
Exactly.
so Hashem uses the tefillos as he sees as being best for those, for whether it becomes their, whatever journey you are on, like you said at the beginning, where becomes part of what you're learning from, what you're growing. This is that silver lining, that there's growth. And I always tell people, and I'm sure that I think I've heard you say this sentiment as well, but I know for myself that having gone through what I went through, which I would never wish on my worst enemy, I respect myself more than I have such a sense of pride and respect for myself, that I was able to overcome it and go through it, sometimes with grace, sometimes not with grace, sometimes kicking and
Right.
screaming, sometimes not kicking and screaming, but I got through it with all the support that I needed, reaching out for resources and davening and everything, that at the end of it, I could say, what kind of person would I have been had I not gone through this?
I know. Isn't that, it's so true. It's so true. We never want any of it. And kicking and screaming is apt. I think it's really important. My kids and I, actually Daryl too, this was before the glue. We used to sit around the table and laugh that we're going to make an Untouched by a storybook. Because not everybody, it doesn't always come out like that, but we do kick and scream. We don't just like open Tehillim and we know everything's going to be okay. No, we kick and scream. And
yes,
the whole point is we kick and scream at Hashem, and that's what a relationship is. And
right.
we work it out. But thank you for sharing that. It's just, I didn't want it this way, but it's here, and this is this is my destiny, and I'm going to live each day as I can, do what's in front of me, hopefully make my family proud and make Hashem proud. That's all I can do.
Right. Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing this incredibly intimate story about what you and Daryl went through. I mean, your willingness to share something that's really very private and that a lot of people don't share publicly. And you've sort of used your story to inspire, and you've even created, this, you created a whole path that you do volunteer pro bono, and also, with professionally, but you're really like an inspiration to those who are going through something that's just really horrifying. But it really is something that we can work through, and we have resources. And if anybody wants to be in touch with Sherri, they can reach out to me and I will put you in touch with Sherri. I'm sure Sherri has a lot on her plate right now. She's very busy, but like you said, you try to reach out to, that's one of the things you put in your bio, that if a chesed opportunity presents itself, you try your best to help out, which is beautiful. So thank you so much for talking with me. And I hope that we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Also, I'm looking forward to it, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, Kedva.
Okay. The views of the host do not necessarily equate the views of the guests, or vice versa. This podcast is not intended to act as a clinical diagnosis or an authoritative halachic source. Any questions regarding treatment should be directed to your clinician, and any halachic questions should be addressed to your local Orthodox rabbi. We also encourage you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and rate our podcast on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Your support helps increase visibility and allows us to reach more listeners who can benefit from our wonderful guest speakers.
This is Rabbi Ben-Zion Schaefer of the shmooze.com. Jewish adulting is about shining a light on parts of ourselves in order to do avodas Hashem with all the tools and resources at our disposal. It is an honor and a privilege to have every day to further refine our character and grow closer to Hashem. Take advantage of these opportunities before it's too late.